craziest thing about episode 8 of the Testaments isn't the violence. It's not the forced marriages, the manipulation, or even the horrifying reveal about Dr. Grove. It's the moment Daisy changes. Because by the end of this episode, Daisy is no longer reacting to Gilead. She's becoming dangerous to it. And honestly, I think episode 8 quietly revealed the exact moment Daisy crossed a line she can never uncross again. This episode is called Broken, but who is actually broken here? Agnes? Hulda? Shunammite? Or is it Gilead itself beginning to crack from the inside? Because if you really pay attention, nearly every conversation in this episode revolves around one thing: control over girls' bodies. And Daisy finally realizes something terrifying. The second Gilead sees her as a woman, her freedom is over. That's why her getting her period isn't just a biological moment. In Gilead, it's basically a death sentence. Think about it. The entire episode treats menstruation like classified information. Aunt Vidala literally removes Daisy and Shunammite from copulation class because they haven't matured yet. The second a girl becomes physically capable of reproduction, Gilead immediately starts preparing her for ownership. Not adulthood. Ownership. And Daisy knows that. That's why she panics. Notice how realistic the scene feels when she discovers the blood. There's no dramatic soundtrack, no over-the-top speech. She's terrified in the quietest possible way. Because this isn't just embarrassment, this is survival instinct. And then comes the detail that changes everything. Shunammite sees it. Now this matters more than people realize. Because Shunammite isn't just gossip-driven comic relief anymore. Episode 8 quietly positions her as one of the most dangerous characters in the series. Why? Because she absorbs information. Constantly. She watches. She stores secrets. And she weaponizes them later. So the moment she discovers Daisy's secret, the episode immediately creates tension without needing action scenes. We already know what's at stake. If the aunts find out Daisy got her period, she gets married off. Immediately. And what's genius is that Daisy's fear exposes the hypocrisy of the Pearl Girls themselves. Aren't Pearl Girls supposed to recruit women into Gilead? Aren't they presented as symbols of devotion and faith? Then why is Daisy desperately trying to avoid becoming what Gilead wants? Because deep down, she already understands the truth. Agnes is only beginning to realize no woman in Gilead is actually safe. Not wives, not daughters, not Pearl Girls, not even aunts. And speaking of Agnes, I genuinely think this episode changes her forever. Look at the structure of her storyline. At first, her biggest concern is romantic disappointment. She wanted Garth. Instead, she's assigned to Commander Weston. The episode almost tricks us into thinking, this is just another cruel arranged marriage storyline. But then Hulda confesses what happened with Dr. Grove, and suddenly the entire episode becomes darker. What makes these scenes horrifying isn't just the abuse itself. It's the way Gilead teaches girls to blame themselves for male violence. Hulda doesn't say, Dr. Grove assaulted me. She says she's afraid she'll burn in hell. That line says everything about Gilead's psychological conditioning. The victim feels guilty. The predator remains respected. And then Aunt Vidala enters the scene like the human embodiment of institutional corruption. Watch carefully what Vidala actually does. She doesn't investigate. She doesn't comfort Hulda. She doesn't even appear shocked. Instead, she guides Hulda into retracting her own accusation. That's terrifying because it tells us this has probably happened many times before. Vidala knows the procedure, which means Gilead doesn't just tolerate abuse. It has systems designed to erase it. And this is where Agnes starts changing too. Her reaction is subtle, but important. When Hulda begs Agnes not to tell anyone, Agnes barely responds. At first glance, it seems passive. But later, the episode reveals why that silence mattered. Agnes is processing something personal. Because when Dr. Grove appears again later, Agnes completely falls apart emotionally. And then comes the devastating reveal. He did things to me. Not tried, not almost, did. That line recontextualizes Agnes' entire behavior throughout the season. Suddenly, her fear around marriage makes more sense. Her discomfort around older men makes more sense. Even her emotional attachment to Garth starts feeling less like romance and more like desperation for safety. And here's where the episode becomes brilliant. Agnes tells Aunt Lydia the truth indirectly. Notice how carefully she words it. She doesn't outright accuse Dr. Grove regarding herself. Instead, she insists Hulda is telling the truth. "I'm very sure." That line is doing so much hidden work. Agnes is basically confessing without confessing, and Lydia understands immediately. Now this is where I think the episode quietly plants a massive future twist. Because Aunt Lydia's reaction is incredibly important. She doesn't dismiss Agnes, she doesn't defend Grove. She listens. Really listens. And for a split second, you can actually see Lydia recognizing the monster Gilead created. This matters because Aunt Lydia has always been complicated. Unlike some of Gilead's true believers, Lydia constantly struggles between protecting girls and preserving the system harming them. Episode 8 pushes that contradiction to its breaking point, and I think Daisy notices it too. Now let's talk about the Garth scenes, because wow, the writers are playing a dangerous game here. The conversation between Daisy and Garth outside the engagement party is loaded with hidden meaning. First, there's the reveal about Commander Chapin being poisoned by Mayday. That detail feels small until you realize what it implies. Mayday isn't just surviving anymore, it's infiltrating powerful people close enough to strike directly. And if Chapin really was poisoned at Jezebel's like Daisy hints, then this connects back to the corruption we saw in the Handmaid's Tale itself. Meaning the sins of old Gilead are literally poisoning the next generation. But, emotionally, the bigger moment is Garth admitting he never expected to fall in love. Did you notice how strangely timed that confession is? He says it while discussing marrying Becca. But he looks at Daisy. That wasn't accidental. The show is creating emotional chaos on purpose. Agnes loves Garth, Daisy trusts nobody. And Becca may be the only genuinely innocent person trapped in the middle. That's a disaster waiting to happen. But the most important part of the conversation is Daisy asking for tampons. Seriously. That might sound ridiculous out of context, but narratively, it's one of the biggest moments in the episode. Why? Because Daisy is asking for something forbidden that allows her control over her own body. Not cloth, not visible evidence, something she can hide. Something private, something Gilead cannot monitor. The symbolism is loud once you notice it. And then Garth says something chilling, "There is no done." That line might define the entire series, because Daisy still thinks escape is possible on an individual level. She thinks maybe she can survive if she gets out. But Garth understands something bigger. You don't escape systems like Gilead by running. You destroy them. And I think that conversation is the exact moment Daisy begins transforming from survivor into revolutionary. Watch her behavior immediately afterward. When Agnes finally reveals Dr. Grove abused her too, Daisy's entire expression changes. She's furious, not shocked, furious. And the camera lingers on her face intentionally. That's the moment she decides action matters more than survival. Now here's my theory. I don't think Dr. Grove survives much longer. Seriously, the episode keeps framing him like a marked man. Multiple girls accuse him. Agnes indirectly confirms it. Lydia now knows. And Daisy looks ready to explode. But the truly interesting question is, WHO takes him down. Will it be Lydia quietly removing him through Gilead channels? Will Mayday target him? Or could Agnes herself eventually expose him publicly? Because remember the episode title, Broken. What if it's not about the girls? What if episode 8 is actually about the illusion of Gilead's perfection breaking apart? Think about every storyline. Agnes realizes authority figures failed her. Hulda realizes innocence doesn't protect you. Shunammite realizes maturity determines value. Daisy realizes womanhood equals imprisonment. Even Aunt Lydia realizes predators exist inside the system she built. Every character loses an illusion in this episode. And then comes the ending voiceover. Never trust a F Pearl Girl. That line sounds funny at first, but it's actually tragic. Because Agnes says it right after Daisy comforts her, which means Agnes still doesn't fully understand Daisy's intentions. She sees Daisy as dangerous. But what if Daisy becomes the person who finally burns the entire system down? Because episode 8 subtly positions Daisy as something Gilead never anticipated. A girl raised close enough to understand the system, but emotionally detached enough to destroy it. Agnes was conditioned from birth. Becca accepts survival. Shunammite craves status. But Daisy? Daisy still remembers another world, and that makes her unpredictable. Honestly, the scariest thing for Gilead isn't rebellion from the outside anymore. It's girls inside the system beginning to compare notes. That's why this episode focuses so heavily on conversations between girls. Secrets spread. Truth spreads. Shared pain spreads. And authoritarian systems collapse. The second victims realize they're not alone. That's what episode 8 is really about. Not marriage, not periods, not even Dr. Grove. It's about awareness. The moment girls begin realizing the fear they carry individually is actually systemic. And once that realization spreads, Gilead's finished. But here's the biggest question of all. Did Aunt Lydia finally choose a side? Because after this episode, I'm starting to think Lydia may already know Gilead cannot be saved. And if that's true, then episode 8 might secretly be the beginning of the end. What do you think? Is Daisy becoming more dangerous than June ever was inside Gilead? Did Aunt Lydia silently decide Dr. Grove has to go? And do you think Garth genuinely cares about Daisy? Or is he still manipulating her for Mayday? Drop your theories in the comments.